Russian President Vladimir Putin has claimed victory in Mariupol, saying his forces have successfully liberated the port city in southeastern Ukraine. Putin ordered his military to blockade the city's Azovstal steel plant, sealing Ukrainian troops and civilians inside. Here's a clip from his televised meeting with his Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu.
I consider the proposed storming of the industrial area pointless. I order to abort it. This is a case when we must think, we must always think, but even more so in this case, about preserving the life and health of our soldiers and officers. There is no need to climb into these catacombs and crawl underground through these industrial facilities. Block off this industrial area so that not even a fly can get through.
The Azovstal steel plant is the last place in Mariupol still in Ukrainian hands. Russia says more than 2,000 Ukrainian troops are holding out in the heavily fortified plant. Ukrainian officials say around 1,000 civilians are also seeking refuge there, with food running low. Kiev is demanding that Moscow open a humanitarian corridor to let civilians flee. Let's cross to Kiev now, where DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters is standing by. Rebecca, what more can you tell us about the situation now in Mariupol?
Well, you heard it there from the horse's mouth. President Putin claiming victory of Mariupol for the Russians. We haven't had confirmation from the Ukrainian side, but it's not unexpected. Terry, have been expecting Mariupol to fall to Russian control for some days now. But in reality, territorially, nothing really has shifted since prior to the statement by President Putin. They have for some days actually held control of the city and of the port, but not of that Azov steel plant, as you've just reported, and that remains the same. Still thought to be 2,000 or so defenders and around about 1,000 civilians hiding in tunnels in the vast tunnel network under that Azov steel plant. But there has been a shift tactically. As you heard there, President Putin calling for a ceasing of the bombardment of that steel plant and instead to be blockaded. It's not exactly clear why that directive was given, whether or not perhaps they want to keep that steel plant intact so that even when they do gain control of it, they can still use it, or perhaps they do indeed need to save some face there and change that tactically because they haven't been able to root out those remaining defenders.
So what's going to become of those people in that steel plant, Rebecca, both the soldiers and the civilians? And I understand there are also around 100,000 civilians left elsewhere in Mariupol.
That's right. Well, the fate of the soldiers and those civilians at the steel plant really remains to be seen. President Putin has said that he guarantees their safety should they surrender, but those troops have ignored previous cease and desist orders by the Russians to come out with their hands up. Assuming that they don't trust President Putin and the Russians, that they will in fact be taken to safety. One of the battalion leaders has actually come out calling for an extraction by international forces and that they be taken to neutral territory. That looking very unlikely at this stage, so not entirely clear what's going to happen to them. But you heard it there from President Putin, no fly shall pass.
So what's the situation elsewhere in eastern and southern Ukraine, Rebecca? What's the latest in the battle for Donbass?
Yes, well, that expected battle for Donbass has entered its third day, Terry. We've seen really a really large increasing in bombardments in that area, particularly in the city of Kharkiv today. The mayor has come out and said it's been under almost constant bombardment, very worried for the some 1 million people still living in that city. Other areas, Luhansk being in the Donbass region, being very badly shelled as well. The mayor there saying that the civilians have no power, no water, and utilities won't be able to be restored until after the war. And of course, Mykolaiv to the south has also been bombarded. That's another city down south near the other key port city of Odessa. So definitely seeing a huge uptick in fighting in that region.
Rebecca, thank you very much. Our correspondent Rebecca Ritters in Kiev. Ukrainian investigators are carrying out the painstaking work of exhuming bodies from makeshift graves. It's part of an effort to gather evidence of alleged war crimes committed by Russian troops. While forensic teams do their work, relatives of those killed wait nearby to claim their loved ones. Our correspondent Matthias Berlinger joined other journalists on a visit to the town of Borodyanka near Kiev. He spoke to one mother whose son never came home.
For the police, it has become a grim routine. Dozens of mass graves have been opened here in the past few weeks. But for Nadezhda Boyko, this is the day she has been waiting for. Her son is being exhumed today.
He was on his way back. He called to say he'd be home soon, but he never came.
Konstantin Boyko was shot on the street in the early days of the war. His body was given a makeshift burial on the grounds of a hospital when the morgue had to close because it had no power. Police say that here in the northern suburbs of Kiev, they have recovered more than 1,000 bodies. The town of Borodyanka was heavily shelled and then occupied by Russian forces. Life is still far from normal, with supermarkets and shops looted and destroyed. People here depend on aid deliveries to survive. At the hospital, police have exhumed 9 bodies today. There were civilians who were shot in the streets or run over by tanks. Some have yet to be identified.
Unfortunately, we'll be doing this work for many more years, but we'll work as quickly and as thoroughly as possible, so we have solid evidence to hold the aggressor accountable in the international courts. Not only those who did it, but also those who ordered it.
The recovered bodies are being sent to the morgue for forensic examination and will then be returned to their relatives.
I know that his soul is gone. I know this is just a body, but it's the body that I used to hug and love. It's my child. I cry every day.
Nadezhda Boyko's one small comfort, that soon she will be able to bury her son properly.